I spent 41 years serving one of the most powerful governments on earth. I signed documents that changed the lives of millions of people. I sat in rooms where wars were decided. I shook hands with men whose names fill history books. And I genuinely believed, that I was on the right side of every single decision I ever made. I was 74 years old when I died in my private office on a Thursday afternoon. My heart stopped for 90 minutes. And in those 19 minutes, God showed me something about power that I was not prepared to see. I came back a broken man, and I've not been able to stay silent since. My name is Karim Mansouri. I served my government for 4 decades, beginning as a young idealist who believed that politics could be a form of service, and ending as a senior official who had learned to confuse loyalty to a system with loyalty to God. I was educated. I was decorated. I was respected by the people around me and feared by the people below me. I prayed every day of my adult life. I fasted. I observed every religious obligation I'd been taught to observe. And I told myself that God was pleased with me because the nation was stable, and I'd helped keep it that way. I was in my office, reviewing documents, when my chest collapsed. That is the only word for it. Collapsed. Like a building whose foundation gives way, all at once. I didn't have time to call for help. I did not have time to think. One moment, I was reading. The next moment, I was somewhere that made every room I had ever sat in feel like a photograph of a room. Before I came back, God showed me 6 things about power, leadership, and what he actually sees when he looks at the governments of men. And he told me, you're going back, not because you deserve to, because someone has to tell the truth. You are one of the few who actually knows what happens in those rooms. The first thing I noticed when I left my body was silence. Not the silence of a quiet room. I had been in quiet rooms my whole career. Rooms where the silence itself felt like a weapon. This was different. This was the silence of the complete absence of agenda. Every conversation I had had for 41 years carried underneath it a current of strategy. What does this person want? What do I want? What is the correct thing to say to preserve the outcome I need? That current was simply gone. And without it, I felt lighter than I had felt since I was a child. I had not realized until that moment how much of my weight had been made of calculation. There was light, and the light was not neutral. It had a quality that I can only describe as verdict, not in a harsh sense, but in the sense of complete clarity. The way a fog lifts, and you can suddenly see exactly where you are and exactly where you have been. And in the center of that light, there was a presence so far beyond anything I had ever encountered in any palace, any court, any seat of human authority, that every powerful man I had ever met suddenly seemed to me like children playing at governance. God did not greet me the way a head of state greets a dignitary. There was no ceremony. There was no protocol. There was only absolute, complete, terrifying knowing. He knew every document I had signed, every meeting I had sat in, every time I had known the right thing and chosen the convenient thing instead, every person whose name had crossed my desk as a problem to be managed rather than a life to be honored. He knew all of it, and he looked at me, not with the rage I expected, but with something that was harder to bear than rage. He looked at me with grief. He said to me, "Karim, I want to show you what you could not see from inside the room." The first thing he showed me was what power actually looks like from where he stands. I expected to see the grand architecture of governments, the structures, the institutions, the systems I had spent my life maintaining. Instead, he showed me people, individuals, one at a time. A woman who had applied for a permit for 3 years and been denied each time by a bureaucrat who simply never prioritized her file. A young man who had been imprisoned, not because he was dangerous, but because he had asked a question that embarrassed the wrong official. A family that had lost their home to a policy decision made in a room exactly like the one I worked in, by men exactly like me, who never once thought about the specific faces that decision would erase. He said, "Karim, power was never meant to be a destination. It was meant to be a tool, and the only legitimate use of that tool is the protection and flourishing of the individual who has no tool at all. Every government I have ever permitted to exist was permitted for one reason: to stand between the vulnerable and the violent. The moment a government inverts that, the moment it becomes the thing the vulnerable need protection from, it has broken the only covenant that gave it the right to exist." I stood in that light, and I thought of 100 decisions. 100 times the calculation had been, what preserves the structure? Never. What protects the person? The second thing he showed me was what religious authority looks like when it is used as a weapon. I had lived my entire career inside a system where God's name was on every official document, where every policy was framed as the will of heaven. Where the language of faith was so thoroughly woven into the language of the state that most people could no longer see where one ended and the other began. I had believed that this was strength, that a nation that invoked God in its governance was a nation that honored God. He showed me that he was not honored. He showed me the specific moment when an institution stops representing him and starts using his name as a signature on its own agenda. That he showed me it the way you would show someone a photograph of the precise moment a bridge begins to crack, not the collapse, but the hairline fracture that made the collapse inevitable. And he said, "I do not lend my name. When men use my name to justify what I would never authorize, they do not gain my authority. They accumulate my judgment." I thought of every decree I had seen issued in the name of God that served the interests of the men who issued it. Every time the language of the divine had been used to make a political decision feel like a spiritual obligation, I had been inside that machinery my entire life. I had never once stepped outside it long enough to see it clearly. The third thing he showed me was the people who had cried out to him from inside the systems I had helped maintain. This was the part that I will carry for the rest of my life, however long that is. He showed me prayers, not the prayers of the powerful. I had heard those my whole career. Formal prayers in formal settings, words spoken by men who then returned to their offices and made decisions that had nothing to do with what they had just said to God. He showed me the other prayers, the ones spoken in whispers, the ones spoken by people who had learned that speaking too loudly in my country cost you something you could not get back. He showed me a mother praying for her son who had been taken. He showed me a student praying for the courage to keep asking questions. He showed me an old man praying simply to live without fear before he died. And he said to me, "I heard every one of these, every single one. And Karim, you were in a position to be part of the answer to some of them, and you chose the structure instead." I cannot tell you what that felt like. There is no language adequate for that moment. To see, clearly and without any possibility of excuse, that the specific prayers of specific people, that your specific choices left unanswered, to understand that power is not just the ability to do harm, it is the ability to do good, and the choice not to is its own kind of harm. The fourth thing he showed me was what he called the accounting of silence. He showed me that the judgment he keeps is not only of the things that were done, it is also of the things that were not said, the official who knew and said nothing, the advisor who saw and stayed quiet, the man in the room who understood what was happening and calculated that speaking would cost him more than silence would cost someone else. He showed me that the moments of silence, the carefully chosen, strategically maintained, self-protective silences of powerful men, were not neutral. They were decisions, and they were recorded as decisions. He said, "Karim, silence in the presence of injustice is not neutrality. It is a vote for the injustice. Every man who stands in a room where wrong is being decided and says nothing has cast a ballot. I have counted every one of those ballots, and the men who believed their silence protected them will discover that it is the thing that most requires an answer." I thought of every meeting, every moment I had understood exactly what was happening and said nothing because saying something would have ended my career or my freedom or possibly my life. I had told myself that staying inside the system meant I could do more good than someone outside it. I had told myself that for 41 years, and God showed me with devastating patience the precise ratio of good I had actually done versus the silence I had traded for my position. The fifth thing he showed me was the faces of the leaders themselves, the men at the very top of the structures of power, and what he sees when he looks at them. I expected condemnation. I expected the image of monsters, of men whose souls had been visibly corrupted by what they had done and authorized. What I saw was more complicated and more heartbreaking than that. I saw men who had started, in many cases, exactly where I had started. With genuine belief, genuine intention, genuine desire to build something that mattered. And I watched, like watching a slow collapse in reverse, the precise sequence of decisions that had transformed intention into its opposite. And the first compromise, the first moment of choosing the structure over the person, the first time the fear of losing power outweighed the fear of misusing it, and then the second time, and the 30th time, and the 10,000th time, until the original intention was so buried under the accumulated weight of self-preservation that the man himself could no longer find it. He said, "I do not make monsters. Men make themselves into what they become, one decision at a time. And the tragedy of power is that each decision makes the next one easier. The first lie requires effort. By the 10,000th lie, the man has forgotten that he is lying. This is why I said it is easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle, not because wealth or power corrupt inevitably, but because they create a gravity, a constant pull toward self-preservation that requires extraordinary and sustained resistance to overcome. Few men resist it. Almost none resist it forever." The sixth thing he showed me, the last thing, was the thing he said he most wanted me to carry back. He showed me the people who are watching. Not the analysts, not the journalists, not the governments of other nations, but the ordinary people, millions of them, living their lives inside systems they did not choose, under authorities they did not elect, shaped by decisions made in rooms they will never see. And he showed me that these people are not invisible to him. He showed me that he has not looked away. He showed me that the patience he exercises in allowing these systems to continue is not indifference. It is the patience of someone who is keeping a very precise and very complete account, and who has never once in human history failed to eventually settle it. He said, "Tell them I see them. Tell the ones who are suffering inside systems of power that I have not forgotten their names. Tell them that no government, no regime, no authority on earth has ever lasted forever, and none ever will. Tell them that the arc of what I am doing in human history is long, but it bends. It has always bent, and it will always bend toward the people, in that mother's prayer, in that student's question, in that old man's simple wish to live without fear. I have never once been on the side of the structure when the structure turned against the person, not once, and I never will be." He told me to go back. And for the second time in my life, the first being the day I accepted my first government appointment, I did not fully want to do what I was being told. But the reason was different this time. The first time I hesitated because I was ambitious and afraid. This time I hesitated because that place, that light, that clarity, that complete freedom from agenda was the first place I had stood in 41 years where no one wanted anything from me except the truth. He said, "That is exactly why you are going back, because you know what it is to be in the room. And you're going to tell the truth about it." I came back to my office, to the sound of my assistant's voice on the other side of the door, to the documents on my desk and the weight of my position and my title and my 41 years of carefully constructed reputation. And I sat there, in my chair, in the silence of that room. And I made the first decision in 4 decades that had nothing to do with what it would cost me. I'm going to tell the truth, all of it, about what happens in those rooms, about what power does to the men who hold it, about the prayers that were offered and the silences that answered them, about what God actually sees when he looks at the governments of men. I am 74 years old. I served power for 41 years. I died for 19 minutes on a Thursday afternoon. And I came back with one message for everyone who has ever felt small and invisible inside a system too large to fight. He sees you. He has always seen you. The room that made the decision that changed your life. He was in that room too. And every man in it will one day stand in the same light I stood in, with the same complete and total absence of protocol, and give an account for every name that crossed his desk and was treated as a problem, rather than a person. Power is not the last word. Yet it has never been the last word, and the people in that mother's prayer, the ones who lived and suffered and prayed in the dark, are the ones whose names he already knows. Tell me in the comments, have you ever lived under a system that made you feel like your life did not matter to the people making the decisions? You do not have to name the country. You do not have to name the leader. Just tell me you know what that feels like. Because he told me to find you. And I have. The structure is not eternal. The person is